there is a story about Irving Layton and Patrick White having dinner first, but Irving Layton said, "Well, I'd like to read you one of my poems." Oh God! And Patrick White said, "Irving, if you read me one of your poems, I'll read you one of my novels."
With delight, I welcome the return of Australian novelist and two-time Booker Prize winner Peter Carey with his new novel, Amnesia, in conversation with the Globe and Mail's arts editor and formerly books editor, Jared Bland. Please help me welcome these gentlemen to the stage.
Just one gentleman for now, but Peter will be here in a sec. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the Reference Library, to Yvonne, to everyone who does this. It's wonderful to be here and to see faces I've seen here before. It's a true honor, and we're just going to get down to business. So we're going to talk for a bit, and then there's a microphone there for your questions, so please keep track of them, have them. It would be nice if we had a big lively Q&A at the end. Peter Carey likely needs no introduction to you, those people who have reserved tickets to see him, but that is not going to stop me from noting that he is the author of The Chemistry of Tears, His Illegal Self, Jack Maggs, Parrot and Olivier in America, True History of the Kelly Gang, and many more of your favorite novels not included on that list. As Yvonne mentioned, he is the twice winner of the Booker Prize, but I assure you only the one-time winner of countless other accolades. So please join me in welcoming Peter Carey.
So I'm going to read from the very beginning of the book, so I guess I have to explain nothing at all. The title of the chapter is One. It was a spring evening in Washington, D.C., a chilly autumn morning in Melbourne. It was exactly 2200 Greenwich Mean Time when a worm entered the computerized control systems of countless Australian prisons and released the locks in many places of incarceration, some of which the hacker could not possibly have known existed. Because Australian prison security was, in the year 2010, mostly designed and sold by American corporations, the worm immediately infected 117 US federal correctional facilities, 1,700 prisons, and over 3,000 county jails. Wherever it went, it travelled underground, in darkness, like a bushfire burning in the roots of trees. Reaching its destination, it announced itself. The corporation is under our control. The angel declares you free. This message, and others more elaborate, were read in English by warders in Texas, contractors in Afghanistan, Kurdistan, in immigrant detention camps in Australia, in Woomera, black sites in the Kimberley, secret centres of rendition at the American Signals facility near Alice Springs. Sometimes prisoners escaped, sometimes they were shot and killed. Bewildered Afghans and Filipinos, an Indonesian teenager wounded by gunfire, a British Muslim dying of dehydration, all these previously unknown individuals were seen on public television wandering on outback roads. The security monitors in Sydney's Villawood facility read, "The angel of the Lord by night opened the prison doors and brought them forth." My former colleagues in the press asked, "What does this language tell us about the perpetrator?" I didn't give a toss. I was grateful for a story big enough to push me off the front pages, where I had already suffered pants on fire. I was spending my days in the Supreme Court of New South Wales paying Nigel Willis QC $500 an hour so I could be sued for defamation. Nigel's billable hours had continued to accrue well past the stage when it became clear that he was a fuckwit, and I didn't have a chance in hell. But cheer up, mate. He was betting 3-2 on a successful acquittal. A successful appeal. That my barrister also owned a racehorse was not the point. Meanwhile, there was not much for me to do but read the papers. Feds now say Angel is an Aussie worm. Would the defendant like to tell the court why he is reading a newspaper? I'm a journalist, my lad. It's my trade. Attention was then brought to the state of my tweed jacket. My lad. When the court had had its joke, we adjourned for lunch, and I, being unaccompanied on that particular day, took my famously shambolic self across to the Botanic Gardens, where I read the Daily Telegraph. Down by the rose gardens, amongst the horseshit fertiliser, I learned that the terrorist, who had been obviously a male Christian fundamentalist, had now become the daughter of a Melbourne actress. The traitor appeared very pale and much younger than her 30 years. Dick Connolly got the photo credit, but his editor had photoshopped her, for in real life she would turn out to be a solid little thing, whose legs were strong and sturdy, not at all like the waif in the Telegraph. She was from Coburg in the north of Melbourne, a flat, forgotten industrial suburb, coincidentally once the site of Pentridge Prison. She came to her own arraignment in a black hoodie, slouching, presumably to hide the fact that our first homegrown terrorist had a beautiful face. Angel was her handle. Gabby was her name in what I have since learned to call Meat World. She was charged as Gabrielle Bellieu, and I had known her parents long ago. Her mother was the actress, Celine Bellieu. Her father, Sando Quinn, a Labour Member of Parliament. I returned to my own court depressed, not by the outcome of my case, which was preordained, but by the realisation that my life in journalism was being destroyed at the time I might have expected my moment in the sun. You see, I had published several books, 50 features, 1,000 columns, mainly concerned with the traumatic injury done to my country by our American allies in 1975. So while my colleagues leapt to the conclusion that the hacker was concerned simply with freeing boat people from Australian custody, I took the same view as our American allies, that this was an attack on the United States. It was clear to me straight away that the events of 1975 had been the first act in this tragedy and that the angel worm was a retaliation. If Washington was right, this was the story I'd spent my life preparing for. If the events of 1975 seem confusing or enigmatic to you, then that's exactly my point. They are all part of the great amnesia. More to come. In court, I listened to as my publisher got a belting from the judge, and I saw his face when he finally understood he could not even sell my book as remaindered. Pulp, he said, including that copy in your hand, sir. Damages were awarded against me for $120,000. Was I insured or not insured? I didn't even know. The crowd outside the court was as happy as a hanging day. Felix, Felix, the News International guy shouted. Look this way, Felix. That was Kev Dawson, a cautious little prick who made his living rewriting press releases. Look this way, Felix. What do you think about the verdict, Felix? What I thought was our sole remaining left-wing journalist had just been pissed on from a mighty height. And what was my crime? Repeating press releases? No. I had reported a rumour. In the world of grown-ups, a rumour is as much a fact as smoke. To omit the smoke is to fail to communicate the threat to the landscape. In the Supreme Court of New South Wales, this was defamation. What next, Felix? Rob a bank? Shoot myself? Certainly no one would give me the angel story, although I was better equipped to write it than, Wired magazine, please take note, to write it than any of the clever children who would be hired to do the job. But I was, as the judge had been pleased to point out, no longer employable in your former trade. I'd been a leader writer, a columnist, a so-called investigative reporter. I had inhabited the Canberra Press Gallery, where my rumours had a little power. I think Alan Ramsey may have liked me. For a short period in the mid-70s, I was the host of drive time radio on the ABC. I was an aging breadwinner with a ridiculous mortgage. I had therefore become a screenwriter and a weekend novelist. I had written both history and political satire, thrillers, investigative crime. The screen adaptation of my novel, Barbie and the Deadheads, was workshopped at Robert Redford's Sundance Institute. But through this, even while bowing and scraping to get seed money from the Australian Film Commission, I remained a socialist and a servant of the truth. I had been sued 98 times before they brought me down with this one, and along the way I had exposed the deeds of Carey Packer and Rupert Murdoch, both old Geelong grammarians by the way, always a very dangerous occupation for a family man, and apparently terrifying to those who rely on him for succour. As the doors of the mainstream media closed to anyone unworldly enough to write the truth, I still published LowTech blog, a newsletter printed on acid paper, which was read by the entire Canberra Press Gallery and all of Parliament besides. Don't ask me how we paid our electricity bill. I worked as a journalist in a country where the flow of information was controlled by 3 corporations. Their ability to manipulate the truth made the right to vote largely meaningless. But I was a journalist, I did my best. In LowTech blog, I revealed the Australian press's cowardly reporting of the government lies about the refugees aboard the ill-fated Oolong. And I quote, "I can't comprehend how genuine refugees would throw their kiddies overboard," said our Prime Minister. Once again, like 1975, here was a lie of Goebbelsesque immensity. The Fourth Estate made a whole country believe the refugees were animals and swine. Many think so still. Yet the refugees belonged here. They would have been at home with the best of us. We have a history of moral and, there's a word missing. We have a history, I think it was moral, I think I put it in. We have a history of courage and endurance, of inventiveness in the face of isolation and mortal threat. At the same time, alas, we have displayed this awful level of cowardice, brown-nosing, criminality, mediocrity, and nest feathering. I was overweight and out of breath, but I was proud to be sued, reviled, scorned, to be called a loser by the rewriters of press releases. I took comfort from it, which was just as well, because there was comfort nowhere else. As would be confirmed in the weeks ahead, none of my old mates were going to rescue me from the slow, soul-destroying grind of unemployment. Thank you.
It gets cheerier from there, I have to say.
Oh, you got some laughs.
Yeah,
come on.
definitely. Last time I saw you, we were in Montreal, and I was interviewing you a book that is mostly about like 19th century automatons. And here we are with a book, a 21st century book about hacktivism and 20th century Australian politics. And every time I read a new book of yours, I just wonder, how do you do that? How do you pivot? How do you just so different each time?
Well, I think the truth is that when I finish a novel, mostly there's this awful period when I don't have another thought in my head, and I can't imagine what I'll do next, and my days are normally spent knowing what I'm doing, which is why a novel's so much better than a short story, because it lasts for long, you've got something to do every day. And so what I mean is I'm not brimming with ideas, and if I have an idea that's interesting, it's sort of like a site of inquiry for me.
Yeah.
And I glom onto it, and I don't let it go. And so whatever it is, it'll almost certainly be an idea of some sort. And the idea will lead you to places that you wouldn't necessarily have thought to go. I mean, my novel Oscar and Lucinda really begins with an idea about it. It starts with a little church in a place where I live being taken away, and very quickly it ends up being a glass church, a box of Christian stories floating down a river in the middle of a landscape of Aboriginal stories. So that's like a sort of a diagram. And from that, thinking about Christianity in Australia and its destructive force and how it's not really for all the death that occurred because of those Christian stories, we didn't need the church anymore. So that's the beginning, and characters were born of that, characters I didn't know. I was terrified of writing about the 19th century. I'd never done that, of course. Well, you're pretty different, but I hadn't lived there myself.
Yeah.
And I was terrified of when I realised my clergyman, and he had to be a clergyman, would have to go to Oxford. How would I know how to write about Oxford University? I mean, it didn't help me that I had publishers who had climbed the walls of Oxford colleges late at night. It hadn't been my experience, so I had to go and do these things. So I'm taken where I don't know. In this case, this really novel begins because I'm having lunch with my New York publisher, Sonny Mehta, and he's just bought the Assange, the ill-fated Assange biography. And we were talking about it, and I at that particular time, was rather exercises by American politicians and media people who were calling Assange a traitor. And, hang on, guys, he's actually an Australian. So he really... he really can't be your traitor. And you don't really know very much about him. And I know some things about him, and one of the things I know about him is that his mother was of the left and was politically active in the period of 1975 when you guys overthrew our elected government. So, wouldn't it be interesting, say, not thinking about Assange, but just thinking about someone, that maybe this is, be careful of, what you sow, because maybe you'll reap it. And maybe there's a reason people do nasty things to you. And maybe the hacker is born from the overthrow of the Australian government in 1975, and indeed my hacker is born on that day.
Okay, well, you have to tell us a bit about that, because, perhaps all of you know every detail of the situation in 1975, but can you give us like a 90-second version of it?
Well, the 90-second version is really, really hard.
Yeah.
It's a complex story. Well, let me start in 1972, after years of sort of being a client state of the United States and generally so colonial suck-ups to everybody else, we elected this one beautiful government, and run by a man called Gough Whitlam, who died very recently. And he was a person of considerable stature, intelligence, courage. And the minute, even before there was a cabinet, Gough and another minister, Lance, who would be Minister, Lance Barnard, sat down, and every day there were amazing announcements. So the first day, we withdrew our troops from Vietnam.
Like on day one.
I mean, and we stopped conscription, and any draft dodgers that were in jail were released, and they began the process whereby there would be equal pay for men and women. They began the process by which Indigenous people would have land rights to the land that was their land forever, but somehow was not their land anymore. Mm-hmm. I have many friends, university education became free. I have many friends my age whose life was changed, who then were able to go to university and get a degree and are who they are today because of those decisions taken in those 2 weeks, and on and on and on. So it's sort of dizzying. And then at the same time, well, America was rather shocked. Yeah. Because we'd been a reliable client state for a long time, and then members of the government, ministers, talked about there was bombing in Cambodia. And the ministers of the government were saying these Americans are maniacs and mass murderers. And that they were a little shocked by saying things like that.
Yeah.
And Whitlam said he was going to form a coalition with Japan and Indonesia to protest against this war. So this was not very good. But the other thing that was, and there's many things which is all to do with the awful side of possibility of socialism and nationalisation and other frightening things. But there was also in the north of the country what was called a signals facility. No Australian Prime Minister really knew what it did. It was a base leased to the United States. And where, for instance, when Cuba leased Guantanamo Bay to the United States, I mean, the agreed rent, I think, is $4,000 a year. The Cubans don't cash the checks, but that's not the point. Australia gave their thing for a peppercorn a year, or one peppercorn for the, and that's what the Americans were paying for this base. We had no control over it. And this base ends up, historically, being still there, and still, if you are the United States and you wish to target a drone in Afghanistan, this is where it is targeted from today. Now, back in 1975, Gough Whitlam said to them, well, we'll probably renew this base, but if you try to screw us or bounce us, he said, we would have to revisit the situation. It was generally understood by the CIA that Whitlam was going to refuse the renewal of the lease, which was to take place, I think, the end of 75 or early 76. I can't remember exactly, but soon. That was a really, really, I still think about what he thought he was doing. I applaud it. It's why we voted for him, that he would do such a thing. But on the other hand, you're looking back on it, you think, how was he ever going to get away with this? And he didn't get away with it. And because months before that, there was this event, which was the dismissal of the Whitlam government. There is a way that you can tell this story, which is the sort of surface story, which is the one which makes perfect sense. And it's to do with events where the upper house refuses supply to the lower house, which seems, I think, to most people in Australia to be an unconstitutional thing. But nevertheless, so the government, in fact, then cannot run the country at all. So you have an inoperable situation in the country. And because we, like you, are a constitutional monarchy, there are mechanisms in place for that in a constitutional monarchy, which is that the Governor-General, who in our case happened to have a long association with the intelligence forces and was of the right of the Labor Party anyway, dismissed the elected government. And at that moment, probably what should have happened was there should have been a general strike. And many of the unions wished there to be a general strike. As it happened, the head of the Australian Council of Trade Unions calmed everything down. His name was Bob Hawke. Bob Hawke, this is very well known from any you don't have to go to paranoid places to discover this, was a frequent visitor at the American embassy. So I just sometimes think, well, if I was the American embassy, wouldn't you have said something to Bob Hawke? And wouldn't you have promised something? In any case, well, that's probably just not true. It's a novelist's fancy. But in any case, he did stop the general strike. And then the other thing that happened after that, all the while this is happening, there's the oil shock, there's a world recession, the economy really stinks, the media, very enlightened newspaper proprietors, are sort of basically making people think that the government are full of criminals. Yeah. And it should have been, and the very fact they were dismissed means they were bad. And there was an election and they lost the election. None of that, to my mind, says there's so much evidence of the CIA's operation in that time and the enormous flood of misinformation that came. And if you wanted to go back, or if you think about Italy after the war, when the Italians really wanted to have social democrats and even communists in their government, they also suffered this sort of use of the carrot and the stick and misinformation, and in the end had the sort of government which allowed them to get Marshall Plan money and which the United States approved.
A bit more than 90 seconds.
How was I meant to do it?
It was very, very. No, but it's important to understand.
How long was it anyway?
I didn't time it because we can't. I mean, you know what? You can't talk about the book without that base of knowledge. And you did the Assange bit, so we have to do that bit. My question to you is: that was 40 years ago, and you've lived in the United States for more than half of that time. So why did this get you going now? I mean, was it just that little pinprick of saying, "Oh, these things"?
Would you ask that question of someone in the Balkans? I mean,
well, no. I want you to elaborate on that. I don't mean it as a challenge. Like I understand. I think.
Well, it's certainly. Well, I'm an Australian citizen. I'm an American citizen. I've lived in New York for 25 years. I've got Australian children, American children. Interesting.
Every port of call.
Interesting. Yeah, they live in all of them. So whenever where I'm talking to my New York friends and I say, you guys really did fuck us over. Yeah. You did this. And they said, what? we knew the CIA did this in Chile, and we knew this and we knew that. We did it to you? Maybe they're just shocked because they think we're all white. I'm not sure. Yeah. But in any case.
So this is an act of activism in a way to educate these people.
Well, you want to tell people. I want Australians to know about this too. I want to know about it too. I've always wanted to find a way to write about it. Yeah. And it does make the book sound, sort of intensely preachy,
political.
Well, it is political, but I've never written anything that isn't political, in my view.
Yeah, there's this amazing moment in the book where this character, Celine, gives birth to the woman who ends up unleashing this worm on the world, and she's cursing the Governor General who's just dismissed the government. And the obstetrician says, no, you've just had a child. There are no politics today. And she looks at him and says, there are politics every day. Only a fool would forget it. Oh, yeah. And I kind of felt you reminding me nicely as a reader through that.
Oh, well... No, I wouldn't
pay attention.
I wouldn't dare do that.
So this book, we've talked about its two kind of primary preoccupations, but it has this other wonderful preoccupation, which I would call oafs. It has these two characters kind of at its core, Felix Moore, from whom you heard, and Woody Town, who you will soon meet thereafter. And they are just oafs. That's kind of the word for them, right? There's this.
Well, one of them's our oaf, and the other's the other side. I mean, one of them. Woody is a sort of a thug. He's a property developer who also sits on. There won't be people like this in Canada, I know. He sits on the board, the opera board, for instance, and might even be the chairman. Might be tone deaf, but is also a patron of the arts, a soldier of the left, a property developer, the son of a murdered rentier.
He's personally supporting 2 or 3 atonal composers.
Who would otherwise have to teach high school.
Yeah, that was my favorite detail.
So, and the thing about this character, who I swear I completely invented, is that when people in Australia read it, they all had ideas about who it was. And I was sort of nervous at that moment because you think if there's somebody like that who thinks that I've done this, the very least they'll do is sue me. But he really was an inventor. So the thing about this character, he's a bad guy, but he's a sort of a brute that we sort of like a little bit. And Felix, who's the alcoholic, uncharming, well, he is sometimes charming.
Yeah.
A journalist. Also is somebody that people say, who did you base that on? And he's like somebody that exists. I hope he's not a stereotype or a type, but he's like somebody that we know, and who we would rather like. You see, so when from the perspective of here, looking at him, and you say he's an oaf, I think, oh my God, But
No, I love
not-
him. He's a
yeah.
very lovable oaf. But he is. It's he's not a stereotype, but in a sense, I felt that he kind of tapped into this archetype and they both did for me. I actually liked Woody. I mean, I know he's a bad oaf, but I liked him quite a lot as well. But I was wondering, like, what is the appeal for you of these oafs? Is it just like these guys wander around with like Shiraz-stained teeth and filthy underwear? Because there are reasons for the filthy underwear. It's not like they wake up and put on dirty underwear. You'll understand once you've read it. But is it just a vicarious thing? You get to have no hangover and all the fun?
They're my people.
Say more.
Say more. Rather than say more. Yes. I just have to say I'm from a different planet. These people don't seem strange to me.
Yeah. No, I work with several of them. And there, and I also, I identify with several of them, all the nasty ones and the good ones. I had a lawyer send me a letter last week threatening me with legal action, and I bucked up with pride because of if Felix can be, 98 times brought under, But I wonder about that. They're your people. Felix says at one point in the book, I had fought the good fight all my life, but I had also become an awful creature along the way.
Felix does like to say things like that, which
Yeah.
is sort of, Felix is one of those people that having done something awful, will say, "Oh, I'm an awful creature," waiting to be forgiven and to, for being an awful creature and for saying that he was an awful creature, and not really believing he's an awful creature, even though indeed he sort of knows he is in some respect. So he would like to say that as sort of a self-protective. It's like, if you're fighting fires, you backburn sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's Felix backburning a little bit.
Woody says to him at one point, he writes Woody a dire letter of apology. And he's like, "You've been saying the same shit to me for 30 years. Like, get up off your knees, basically."
Yes.
And this is him kind of trying to talk us into the same position.
Well, surely we all know sort of compulsive apologizers who really should apologize and who think that really apologizing's enough. I know I'm awful. You are really, but we'll forgive you this time.
I have a friend who calls those texts you send the next day regretsies. And you get the little text with all the shameful things you need to apologize for.
I've got a fantastic letter, which I firstly got offline and then changed an apology letter when you can't remember really whether you should apologize or not.
Can you do it off the top of your head?
No, it's complaining for ruining the company picnic, which everybody looks forward to so much. And although it said fancy dress, and not realizing that the dress that I wore was inappropriate and upsetting to people's children. So I that's about all I can remember offhand. But it's quite good because you sort of, occasionally you have a terrible moment when you realize you were expected to apologize. So mostly you get away with it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a bit of Felix in me, do you think?
No, definitely not. No Felix in you at all. I wouldn't have guessed. At one point, Woody says to Felix, the book features a lot of kind of amazing conversations between the two of them. Their dynamic is ridiculous and very real feeling if you've ever had a friend for a very long time whom you love and hate at the same time. And Woody says to Felix, he's trying to knock him off his idealist pedestal, and he says, you were born in a country that has never had a war. And he kind of implies, sort of what you just knocked at me about the Balkans. He's like, well, what's so bad about that? You don't have to manufacture this.
Well, he's saying he who is on the other side of the argument is saying, you live in this country that's blessed never to have a war, and what do you want to have? You wanted to have a general strike, and did you know that the Governor General already had the army out, which actually he did, on standby, and anybody who was going to think about Australia, and if you really wanted to be serious about having a general strike, what were you really expecting? And what did you want to confront? And so I think Woody's argument at that moment, dreadful person that he is a good argument. Mm-hmm. And there isn't an answer, and there isn't a right or a wrong answer to it. I think we should have had a general strike, but it's a terrifying thought.
Yeah, he says at one point, he accuses him of desiring a civil war almost, which it was kind of an interesting thought experiment for me because trying to think myself into that place of a culture that feels, of course, there are the foundational wars of that culture and the people you referred to, but beyond that, a kind of conflictless or historical conflicts. Can you project that? What was that like? What did that feel like? Were you teetering on a brink? In a real
Well,
way?
I don't think anyone would dispute that Sir John Kerr really did have the army on alert.
You do want to dispute that?
Huh?
You do dispute
No,
that?
no,
Okay.
that's undisputable, and that certain members of the left and other trade unionists wanted a general strike. So if you started to think what happens if the Australian Army starts shooting Australian trade unionists, I don't know.
Yeah. Bet none of you expected such an Australian history lesson when you walked into the library today.
Well, I might say, guys, just by the way, this whole history thing and the history we don't know when reading books, I've just picked up for the second time in my life, Balzac's Lost Illusions. It's full of politics that we don't. I mean, you can decide either you've got to go back and read French history again and really know everything that he's talking about, or you go with it.
Yeah.
And I think this book is sort of written that you don't have to read this and worry that you don't know, and you don't have to have that awful experience of feeling stupid, because I don't know this, I'm meant to know this. And basically, the story will carry you through, and you will, if you don't know everything an Australian will know, well, actually, maybe you might, because a lot of the Australians are going to read this are going to be under 30, and they won't know it anyway.
Yeah, a lot of the people who read this won't have been alive when any of this happened.
Yeah.
And I should say it is absolutely true. Like, you read along and you're kind of, as a reader who didn't know the backstory, admittedly, you read along and you're intrigued by it, and then there comes a point where you're told a bit of information in a very elegant way within the narrative, and then you're kind of confident and on good ground. I don't mean to say that it's something, you know.
No,
hammer
but one inevitably ends up talking about these things at some length, and you know, you really don't. I think one of the things about it, perhaps for a reader who's not Australian, just think, I actually went to Australia with this book. I was expecting to get beaten severely. Instead, I found myself on ABC, which is like CBC, 11 radio shows, 4 television shows, and only once getting sandbagged by a right-wing politician, and for the rest being listened to. And no one arguing with me. So I think that passes some sort of a test. And I think one of the things as a reader, if you want to read this book, you've got to decide if I'm nuts or not, and if this information is reliable or not. And you can spend a lot of time Googling, and, you know, that's, of course, a lovely, healthy exercise. But you don't really need to, in the sense that I think it's you could trust that it's reliable information. You could also accept that there will be people with other points of view who would, you know, disagree with me. But I'm not in a mad minority.
Were you heralded as some sort of socialist savior when you returned with this book?
I mostly, actually.
Yeah. The other...
It's really boring, actually. I tell you, first I was thrilled, but, you know, now it's not.
Yeah. You wanted to fight.
No, I want to be a socialist savior.
Okay. The other thing, as I said at the beginning, that this book is about is the internet. And, you know, I think you did a good job of explaining the connection between these two fields of inquiry in your mind. But I was curious about your own internet habits. Were you an early adopter?
No, I wasn't.
Did you have to learn all this stuff for this thing?
Yes. The weird thing, you know, a lot of this book is set before the internet, but it's not before hacking, and that's not before kids were, you know, getting into NASA, for instance, as the young Julian Assange did. So I had to figure out how I was going to do it. It happens to me often with books that the idea arrives, and I don't know anything about where I've got to go, and I've got to find out about it. So I've got to write. I mean, I wrote The Kelly Gang, and actually I'm terrified of horses. I got thrown by a horse, and I never got on a horse ever again. But I had to write, you're going to write The Kelly Gang, you've got to write about horses. And you've got to write a book so that people who ride horses and love horses believe every word you say. So this is possible to do, and you do that by listening to people and talking to people, by reading a lot, and so on. And in the case of this, I knew I would have to do this. And part of the thing is that you go to people who can help you, and you sort of conscript people, and you're obsessive, and wherever you are, you're asking about this. And I was, for instance, I was at the physio in New York, and I'm telling him about this, and how I need to get somebody, a tech person who can read and to help. And he said, my client X works across the road at Google. And I said, do you think he'd talk to me? He said, I'm sure he would. So I met, we talked, The guy ended up reading 3 drafts of this book. I think he thought at the beginning it would never be possible to do something, because he'd say, not going to work, no way, never, about a particular thing I tried to do. And he was patient, he educated me.
Yeah.
And at the end of the process, he had a book that he could read that made sense to him. In a way, and part of the culture is young people don't even know now. It's the text adventure games and the pre-internet hacking and so on. So it works. And I had a wonderful colleague at Hunter College in New York who's an artificial intelligence woman, and she wrote some of the Lisp code in the book.
I was going to ask who wrote the code. But it's kind of clever in its construction because, as you say, a lot of it happens in sort of what we would think of as pre-internet days. I guess, Gabby would be, like a high schooler at that point. So kind of early 90s or something like that.
Well, late 80s.
Late
yeah.
80s. And it's, you did this clever trick, which is it's really difficult to write about the internet because the internet's different every day. So you wrote about the internet as it was sort of being born. When it's finite and it's a closed system and you can actually
I did it not because I was clever, but because the timeline, this is where you have to be. If your character is born in 1975 and this is going to happen there, this is what you've got to find out about. You've got to find out that spot in history. And so that's why I was there. Now, it wasn't any cleverness, it was just the story forces you to be there. Yeah.
There's a very beautiful, near the end of the book, several paragraph long kind of ode to the simplicity and beauty of code and computer languages.
Yeah.
What did the Google guy say about that? A little over the top?
No.
Gabby compares it to Montaigne. Imagine Montaigne shaping the form of the essay, and it's really stirring. It's
one of the great things about having a literate character. For the minute she reads.
Yeah.
It's a bit more cheerful too, in a way. He never said anything about that, but the interesting thing about when you are dealing with something that's very technical like coding, and I knew that if I'd tried to learn a single computer code, it was not going to be my gift. It was going to take forever. I would be better off writing my novel. And so I read a lot of books by people who wrote code and writing about writing code. And in the end, you sort of do, if you read enough of it, feel the sort of the emotional gratification of doing it and making the complex simple and those sorts of things. And if you have, and that of course is a very satisfying thing in art as well, to take complexity and create dazzling simplicity from it.
She reminded me so much of my best friend who lives in New Zealand now, who's a computer scientist whose specialty is in pure math and symbolic logic.
Right.
And often after like our 5th or 6th whiskey, he'll try to explain some concept to me, which is hilarious every single time. I never understand a word of it. But it sort of arrives and he'll be like, it's kind of like that Mark Strand poem when he says, and I just envy this man's brain.
He does that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he does it. And he's the only person I've ever known who does it. I was reading this and thinking the computer people at work, whom I can't imagine doing that leap, which is no knock.
Well, not all of them will, of course.
Yeah, it's very special.
But,
you were talking about being on TV in Australia, and I watched an interview, not the one with the politician, happily. But
that's out there.
Yeah, one you did at the ABC. And you said she was asking you about whether you read on an iPad or in a book. You were talking about the virtues of reading on an iPad. And you said, I'm reading mostly dead authors now anyway. And I wanted to ask you about that. Why are you reading dead authors?
Well, it's your responsibility to read, be part of the conversation about living literature and make decisions about it. Read an enormous amount of crap to get to the beautiful things that are being made in our time. But in order to do that, you've got to be prepared to read a lot of things that are not beautiful. I'm 70 years old. I'm retired from that. So I'd rather not be part of the sifting process, which takes a lot of work to get to the gold. And occasionally, because Hermione Lee wrote this biography of Penelope Fitzgerald, who I'd never read, I just started reading Penelope Fitzgerald. And like everybody else has read Penelope Fitzgerald, but I haven't. And I was absolutely staggered and thrilled. And so I read about 5 of her books in a row and then read Hermione's book. But so things, I don't know. As a reader, as a writer who reads all I really want is to be fed and thrilled and learn something. And it doesn't happen every day. So where are you most likely to get to be thrilled?
Conrad.
Yeah. There you go. Conrad. Yes, exactly.
You also, though, have a lot of, you told me a very good anecdote, which is not repeatable on the stage, unfortunately, backstage, about a dinner party with a number of great names. And you have a lot of famous friends who are very good writers. Do you read their books?
I read my friends' books.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a thing of friendship. You know, that one reads one's friends' books.
I try to avoid reading my friends' books.
Yeah.
So then they want to know what you thought.
Yes, well, that's right. Well, if you're a writer and you have friends who are writers, you all know how to lie to each other. That's all right.
So as you say, you're 70 years old. This is your 13th book. It must get different. And I was wondering, what is hard for you now that used to be easy? Or what is easy for you now that used to be hard?
Well, I don't think anything's easy. Well, you wouldn't want it to be so boring. I mean, what's thrilling about it is the difficulty, and to go into something that you really don't know about and don't know how to solve, and to give yourself the thrill of the danger and the sort of heart attack of the danger. So that's why life's thrilling, and to come out knowing something that you didn't know you could even know, and that you didn't know, and to have characters you've never met, all those things are wonderful. So that's hard, but I've really learned to appreciate that. And I think now was a young writer, like starting Oscar and Lucinda, I had no idea that I could do it at all, or really work. And I had no right to even think that I could. Now I think there's a chance I can do it. I think the thing that I feel now, if I perhaps might want more, want to produce something better than what I've produced. Maybe I'm more discontented. I'm more aware of how it falls short of what I would want.
I liked what you said when we started talking about how when you begin a book, you're just thrilled because it's something to do with your day. Is the end case of that scenario true as well? Do you find yourself reluctant to wrap it up? Because you're like, well, I'm going to have to run my errands after this.
No, I really want to wrap it up. I want to wrap it up because, there's a thing in a novel which is it's like an argument in a way, and you've got to be able to conclude the lines of logic that lie within it, and you've got to tie all the threads. And until I actually get there, which will be at the end, I will have written the first 5/6 of the book, maybe 20 or more times. Yeah. But I won't have written the very, very end. And so the thing of getting to the end where it's sort of finding that you can put this together and everything can come together, it's really thrilling. And even coming through to the very end, there's lots of details about what will happen and what won't happen. And there's so many different possibilities, even in the last 20 pages. Yeah. And when I'm making the decision, I'm just writing, and I've just got all these possibilities that exist, and I take what I want. So that's a thrilling part to be able to actually finish. So I want to have that sort of feeling.
You can feel that moment of acceleration in this book, because I won't get into an elaborate exploration of it. There's a structural, I don't even know that it's a very impressive and elaborate structural game that starts happening about halfway through the book or so. And in the last 30 pages, it's sort of like someone's foot just hits the metal. And it's, really, you can propel forward.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a positive thing in terms of my character, but I do that. Yeah.
But you can just
maybe I should put my foot on the brake a bit more at the end, but I can't. So I've got my
I could feel you racing through to that day of no new book to write and all your bills paid and dry cleaning picked up.
I'm not thinking about that. I'm just thinking about finishing the book, and then the abyss. So.
The abyss, my favorite note to end on. Does anyone have? I know we'll have lots of questions, so if you want to kind of approach the microphone in an orderly fashion, and we'll answer them. Well, he'll answer them. Come around this way if you want, yeah. You can form a line, again, as long as it's tidy. Yeah.
Well, it's pretty tidy so far.
Good day, Peter, and welcome to Toronto.
Thank you.
Cuthbertson 66, by the way, if you should know what that means. Wondering if you realise that the US ambassador to Australia at the time of the dismissal was Marshall Green.
Yes, I did know that.
Who was US ambassador to Chile.
Yes, he was.
At the time of the Allende affair.
And Indonesia at the time of the coup there, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
Three makes
I
a
just think
Strand.
it's an important bit of information. And also, Sir John Kerr is linked to the Governor General at the time, is linked to another one of your books, My Life is a Fake, in that he worked with Stuart Macaulay
Right.
in the Directorate in
Yes.
the US Army,
Yes.
Australian Army,
Yes.
during the Malley affair. So, anyway, just a few observations. Thank you.
Well, thanks for mentioning
Excellent.
Marshall Green. Thank you. Mr. Coup, I think he was called. The US
Captain
ambassador.
Coup. Terrifying. Gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I just wanted to know, how do you know, do you know that you're such a good writer?
And we're going to stop there.
Do you feel, you mentioned you said something, you said as a writer, you read because you want to be fed. Do you know that you feed? Do you know that you fed me? Do you know that you write well? Do you feel like a really good writer? Because you are.
The first thing I think is, do I know I'm a really good writer? Am I confident that I'm a very good writer? Well, absolutely not at all. And I think that writers generally from very, very young, as a 21-year-old, I was amazed. I'd read nothing, I knew nothing, but somehow I was determined I was a very good writer, and that I couldn't bear to write anything like anybody else had written. So I had read a lot of ambition and energy and confidence, and of course I knew I was worthless at the same time. And I think if you're talking to young writers all the time, they live with tremendous ambition and hope and confidence, and at the same time they fear always that they're not very good at all. And I can go through my life, and I've written a lot of books, and I've won some prizes, and I've been praised more than I've been criticized. But somebody telling me they didn't like my book or my book was ridiculous could bring me low in an instant. And so I guess yes, I do think I'm a good writer, but it's a sort of a fragile state. I think that's, and I also say, because I teach in New York, I say, you know how you feel now? You wonder if you're any good or not, and if you're going to find out whether you're any good or not, and you know how uncertain you feel? Well, that's the life you've chosen, and you're going to feel like that all your life.
I love your books, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this isn't so much a question as a thank you. Around the time that the Booker was being awarded in the fall, there was an article about you, I think it might have been in The Guardian, and you were talking about how you were not happy with the Booker being open to American writers, which I completely agree with. I think it's a horrible idea. And they asked you who you hoped would win. And you mentioned Richard Flanagan's novel, The Narrow Road to the Deep North. And based on that recommendation, I read it and absolutely adored it. It's one of the best books I've ever read, and I highly recommend it to anybody in this room to read that book. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
And secondly, what other Australian writers, should we be reading?
Well, you're all going to read Richard Flanagan immediately. And there's a writer...
Big fan over here of Richard Flanagan.
There's a writer who, my impression is, has never successfully been published outside of Australia. She's been published, but not... And that's a woman called Helen Garner. Is she published here? Does she have a readership here? Yeah. She's one of our... Anyway, she's remarkable, and I think she's one of our finest writers. And I know people in the United States don't know about her, as they should. So I always like to mention her, and apart from that, I don't think any of them are any good.
We're much better at
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it would be, I mean, the American thing must be, vexing for you, decreasing as it does your odds of winning for a third time. Kind of.
Well, I think firstly, no one's going to win a third time. And secondly, I did say some things about the Booker, which my English publishers didn't want me to say, really. But
you can Google them. It's good.
anyway.
Next question.
You mentioned earlier about writing the first 5/6 of a novel 10 or 20 times before you get to the end. Do you know how it's going to end? Do you have that all planned out and you're just waiting for the moment to pounce on it? Or is it still up in the air until you get
Well,
there?
I do know, but I don't want to see it too exactly. I want to have all the sort of forces in place leading to the point that I sort of will refuse to. I sort of know it in a fuzzy sort of a way. I mean, I know what it means, and the action has been leading to that moment all the time, but I don't know. And there's a lot of options at the very end. We could go this way, that way, that way, and I like it to be like that.
So you don't start the process by writing a clever last line?
Oh God, no. No, I don't end it that way either. Thank you very much.
We'll have time for like one or two more after this if anyone else wants to line up. But.
Last time you were here, you said that the film adaptation for the Kelly Gang was in the process of being developed, and I was wondering, how is that going? It seems like an insurmountable task. And are you involved at all? And if you are you happy with it?
Well, firstly, we lost, or David Orkin is the producer in London, a wonderful producer and a great man, and he had the director in place. We lost the writer. So now they've got to find, or he has found another writer, and then the director's now off doing another project, the way these things go. So we just hope that there'll be a script by the time the director is once again available. Am I involved? I shouldn't be. The only thing that I did, there were things that I said I thought were important about the story, and there was, when the director and the writer were going to Australia to do research, there was a lot of information I gave them that I thought might help them if they wanted to follow it up, and they did. But apart from that, I really shouldn't have anything to do with it at all.
Why not? You've done it
Well,
before.
I've written the book. That's my job. And I think the film, I don't want someone to write something that's respectful. Respectful adaptations are really boring. I think that that they have the responsibility of doing it, but they also have the right to fail. They have the right to take the risk, and I think it's that they should. The novel is like a clay pot that you smash on the floor and grind up, and then use that clay again to make the new thing, the film. And it's got to be like that if it's going to be good, because faithfulness doesn't. Films are made from light and electricity. They're dramatic works, and it's different to a novel. My novels are too long, too complicated. We need to dig up Robert Altman and have him make a 20-hour film.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you.
Just a broad question on the subject of Australian writers. You've had one Nobel laureate, and that was Patrick White. I'm just wondering how you feel about Patrick White's work. And sort of related question, when the dismissal took place, I'm told that Patrick White had a reaction that was over the top. But I have no idea what that was or what happened there. So just how do you deal with that?
I can't remember. Well, I haven't read White for such a long time, and it's something on my list of things to do, to revisit, because the person who read Patrick White last is not this person. So I don't know how I would read Patrick White again, but I certainly read a lot of him, and it meant a lot to me. I feel great curiosity about what I will feel now about it. I just got no idea. White, he was a sort of a curmudgeon, the old bugger, really. Did become sort of amazingly democratic at certain stages towards the end of his life, and various things in Sydney, like for instance, they built this awful monorail through Sydney, which was really grotesque, and numbers of us marched against it. And he became he was the leader of the march against the monorail. And that sort of, Patrick White leading the people was at once very moving and wonderful and really weird. I don't think it was his sort of nature, really, to find himself in that sort of situation. And when I can't remember what he said or did in 75, but I know he would be, in my terms, on the right side. One would rely on him for that. But that's all I can remember about it.
So I was told that he was in a fury about it.
He was what?
In a fury about it. Like he was really...
I think he's quite often in a fury, really. I mean, there's just a little bit of gossip, really. God, what's your famous poet? Somebody, Irving?
Irving Layton.
Irving Layton. So there is a story about Irving Layton. And Patrick White having dinner, and Irving Layton, they didn't really get on terrifically well at first, but Irving Layton said, well, I'd like to read you one of my poems.
Oh, God.
And
At dinner.
And Patrick White said, Irving, if you read me one of your poems, I'll read you one of my novels. Whereupon White was taken down with an asthma attack, so the evening ended badly. This may be totally untrue, but I think not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming out, and we'll see you soon.